We're just seeing such a tremendous increase in the number of students that are presenting with food allergies, and so try to ensure the safety of each and every one of our students in this topic. And I am a parent of a food allergy student and understand, the life or death situation of these. And I know several of our other board members have students as well as do a lot of parents. I mean, everybody is affected some way or somehow with this issue. So thank you for Ms. Wallen's efforts. Nursing division, thank you so much for being there and for identifying this issue and really trying to help improve the safety of our students in that capacity.
Very good. Any others? Thank goodness.
All the time.
Just a few to let you know. HR Finance Board Subcommittee meeting. Great opportunity. Efforts work there at headquarters, and it really was fun. I have to say the highlight probably was Dr. Marty's holiday wishes, and if you get a chance to see that, you'll see the true thespian that he is. It was quite enjoyable.
You might identify my friend over here for those joining us from home.
If we're lucky, maybe Dr. Marty, all the way from Germany, is Skyping
wave
in.
to him.
Welcome, Dr. Kershaw.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for remembering.
Mm-hmm.
There are no upcoming subcommittee meetings. Those will be forthcoming next year. May I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
Aye.
All right. Well, I'm going to just speak briefly here and address, because the board has been so involved and throughout the entire fall, as you know, we've had multiple work sessions, went through many updates and revisions to our strategic plan and our goals and measurable objectives. But this really started in 2009. This was really the foundation laid when we reworked our mission and our original Project Parkway goals and measurable objectives. And it's been a dynamic, ongoing process. And so I just want to reiterate that really Project Parkway, the first iteration, was the foundation for where we are today. When we retook a look at our strategic planning, it involved thousands of stakeholders beginning last year through the listening tour, multiple surveys and board retreats, steering committee meetings, administrator meetings, teacher leader meetings, and multiple board work sessions. Kind of the quick summary is we've narrowed it down to 3 goals and focus areas. Goal 1, centered around students, the academic and character development of students. Goal 2, regarding our staff, recruiting, hiring, and developing quality staff members. And Goal 3, focusing on our resources, the efficient and responsible allocation. And under each of those sections, you'll see on your report that you have the measurable objectives as well. So what we're asking the board to approve or consider approving tonight in our administrative recommendation is that the board approves the 3 goals and the measurable objectives, with an understanding that we will have other key performance indicators that we can adjust along the way. Are there any questions?
Any questions from the board for Dr. Kirchhofer or anyone else?
One question on Goal 2, where it says Parkway will attract, employ, develop, and retain an exceptional staff dedicated to and representative of Parkway's diverse community. And this just was a thought that popped in as I was reading this for one more time before I came to the meeting. What about recruiting? The word Parkway will recruit in addition to attract. And I kind of waffled around those 2 terms and whether or not recruit should be a more active term as part of this goal to really go out there after people that we want to see, or is attracting them, employing them, developing enough as part of this particular goal?
And I'd like if Amy Joyce can come down. She's really led the work behind the language development of that goal, measurable objective, so I think she'll be able to address that. So I think, just to add to that, I think when we talk about the recruiting part, that's actually part of Goal 2's action steps. And so to be part of the action plan is sort of our strategy to recruit. It will be implemented. But overall, we want this to be a desirable place to work. Right. Okay. But certainly the recruitment part will be part of these action steps, the strategic plan.
At the meeting that Chris mentioned the other day, Phil talked about reaching out beyond the St. Louis community, well beyond the St. Louis community, and some other strategies to attract and recruit candidates as well, which is emphasis will be on diversity, of course, but beyond that as well, to go out to the entire country.
Yes, and that's with our Teach Away platform, and we're hoping to get that up and running here shortly. But it is specifically for candidates who are looking to relocate. So we are reaching broad beyond the Missouri and St. Louis borders.
I appreciate that question. I appreciate the efforts to emphasize that, and certainly board for the last many years, the whole board, and there have been improvements. But we're hopeful that some of these actions will step that up. So appreciate anything we can do at all.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
May I have a motion and a second that the Board of Education approve the 2016-2021 Parkway School District Goals and Measurable Objectives? Second. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Applebach? Yes. Mrs. Feldman? Yes. Mrs. Hopper? Mrs. Mogerman? Yes. Dr. Sirikina? Yes. Mr. Jacobs?
Yes. Motion carries 6-0. Thank you very much.
Good. Want to add to just, we really appreciate that now that the formal approval here really sets forward the work of the action teams and action steps. So appreciate the board's support this evening.
It's going to be exciting. And 12.02, approval of the audit. Brian Whittle, Director of Finance, and Teddy Goodborough, our CFO. Look forward to your presentation.
Oh, okay. Actually, our auditors will present this. So I'm just going to introduce him as Brian Wirtz. He's with the auditors. They come out about 3 weeks during the year. It's every time I look out of my office, I see an auditor. It's a fun time, but I think it's a good experience. Yeah, I appreciate. It's gotten a lot easier because now we can just give them a laptop, and since all of our invoices and everything are digital, they can open up. There's any transaction they want to see, they can see it. So, but I'll let Brian Wirtz get in the detail of the audit. I will point out that we got an unqualified opinion, which is the best opinion you can get.
Thank you. It's never a good idea to make fun of your auditors. As Brian said, my name is Brian Wirtz. I'm a partner with the accounting firm of Kerbeck and Breckel, and we're the independent auditors for the school district. Before I get into the presentation, I always kind of like to give an overview of what our responsibilities are when it comes to an audit, what your responsibilities are when it comes to an audit, what we're required to do when it comes to an audit, and how we get to our opinion. It's management's responsibility to prepare these financial statements, and it's their responsibility to determine that the basis used to prepare these financial statements is appropriate. These financial statements are prepared on the full accrual basis of accounting and the modified accrual basis of accounting. So we always, in our accounting profession, as accountants like to play jokes on each other and talk about two sets of books. You don't want to have two sets of books, but in the governmental arena, it's okay to have two sets of books, actually, and we have some that have three, because they'll have accrual basis, modified accrual, and then they'll have cash basis for their budgetary accounting. So you could actually have up to three. I think the most important part of what the management's responsibility is with your oversight is the internal control structure of the district. So it's management's responsibility to design, implement, and maintain an internal control structure relevant to the preparation and fair presentation in the financial statements, that there would not be a material misstatement in the financial statements, and to safeguard the district's assets. So it's an important part of the internal controls of the district. Our responsibility then is to audit the financial statements and that are prepared by management with your oversight. We perform our audit in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards, government auditing standards, and uniform guidance, which used to be A133, and that's just audit requirements as it relates to federal programs. The objective of our audit is to provide reasonable but not absolute assurance that there's not a material misstatement in the financial statements. And the reason we say that is because we don't do 100% test of transactions, so we can't give absolute assurance. In planning and performing our audit, we're required to assess risk, like where are there risks in the financial statements and where is there a risk that there could be a material misstatement. In the planning stages of our audit, everybody that's included on the engagement, we have a brainstorming activity and discuss where we think there could be risk in this entity's financial statements. So every audit is now different. You used to be able to audit every school district the same way. Now, since it's a risk-based approach, we have to determine where the risks are, design the audit procedures to address those risks, and then perform those audit procedures in accordance with GAAP. In developing our risk, we also assess fraud. And what we do with fraud as it relates to the financial statements is we do interview employees, we interview management, and possibly even might call on a board member and just and ask if they're aware of any fraud. If they were aware of it, what would they do? Who would they report it to? And that sort of thing. It's interesting because the AICPA said that people know about fraud, they never tell anybody because no one's ever asked. Well, I've been in accounting for 30 years, and I've been asking, and no one's ever told me anything. So I'm not sure if that's a true statement or not. And you read it in the paper all the time. I mean, every day you read the paper, somebody's stealing from somebody, it seems like. And so as a part of our audit, we do review the internal controls of the district, but we do not give an opinion on those internal controls. And in reviewing them, we get an understanding of how they work. Management gives us a commentary of how the internal controls work. We do a walkthrough to determine that the internal controls are working as documented. The most important internal controls of the district are related to the revenue cycle, the expenditure cycle, the payroll cycle, and financial reporting. And the financial reporting means on a monthly basis. How do they close the financial statements, and are they accurate on a monthly basis, not just at June 30th? We also review the internal controls as it relates to federal programs, and we actually test those internal controls, but again, we do not give an opinion on those internal controls. So the financial statements that we issued were up to 94 pages. I mean, this thing is getting huge. The CAFRs are usually about that. And then another 17 pages as it relates to federal and state programs. So we're well over 100 pages. Just hitting a few things that are in the audited financial statements. We have the introductory section. Then, excuse me, the next thing is the ASBO Certificate of Excellence in Financial Reporting, which is, it's awesome that the district submits that to get the certificate. They get it, and not only do we get it, but we had 5 comments this year. All 5 of them, in my opinion, were immaterial, or really not much at all. One of them we disagreed with, and I'll tell you, one of them, we used the word sale of bonds instead of issuance of bonds, and that was a comment. I mean, that's how much they're looking for things. Then we have the management discussion analysis, which is unaudited, and that's prepared by management and describes the current year financial results and plans for the future of the district. Then we have the government-wide financial statements, which is on the full accrual basis of accounting, which includes fixed assets, debt, and a pension liability, which is significant. Then we have the fund financial statements, which are on the modified accrual basis of accounting. We have a proprietary type fund, which is used to account for the self-insurance of the district. Then we have the notes to the financial statements, required supplemental information, and then supplemental information. And that's just in the CAFR. And then we have the federal and state reporting package, which addresses federal requirements and state requirements as it relates to budget, attendance, and transportation. So now going into the board presentation, we have certain communications that we're required to disclose to the board. The first one is the plan, scope, and timing of our audit. We performed our audit in accordance with the plan, scope, and timing as it was communicated to you in our annual engagement letter that was dated June 9, 2016. The significant accounting policies used by the district to prepare the financial statements are note 1 to the financial statement, which is the summary of significant accounting policies. There was a new GASB this year, GASB 79, that was adopted, and it allows you to report pooled investments either on the cash basis or the fair market value. But that was adopted this year. It did not have a material effect on the financial statements, but we're required to disclose that to you. There were no transactions entered into by the district that lacked authoritative guidance, and there were no significant transactions done in a period other than when they were recorded. There are estimates in these financial statements, so we're required to disclose that to you. Some of these estimates are significant, and which means that basically when the results of those estimates become reality, there could be significant differences between the estimates and how they're finally concluded. The financial statements disclosures are neutral, consistent, and clear. There are certain disclosures that are sensitive because of their significance to the financial statements, and what I would say on that one is note G as it relates to the retirement plan, and that thing is 9 pages long, and it really gives a lot of information, but ultimately it reconciles how the district has to record their proportionate share of the underfunded amount of the pension liability. And so that's a big one. We encountered no significant difficulties in performing our audit or dealing with management in completing our audit. And at this time, I would like to just sort of point out that Brian and Patty did a great job of getting the information to us. I know he likes auditors, so he likes us to be around, but he did make it efficient for us, so we weren't around that long. I think we usually try to do about 3 to 5 days at interim and another 2 weeks at final. And we got that done, so thanks to their help. There were no adjustments or uncorrected misstatements as a result of our audit. We had no disagreements with management. We do get a management representation letter, which is dated the same date as our audit, which basically them communicating to us that they responded to all of our inquiries. They gave us full access to the financial records, board minutes, disclosed any subsequent events or contingent liabilities. That date, December the 7th, is the date that we take responsibility for any subsequent events or contingent liabilities. So if something existed on June 30th, and we have to determine where it is on the date of our financial statements, which is December the 7th, and determine if there's an additional disclosure or an adjustment that needs to be made before we can issue our report. If there were any consultations by management with any other CPAs, we would be required to disclose that to you, which there were not to our attention or to our knowledge. And we do have discussions with management throughout the year and throughout the engagement, but none of those discussions are based on our retention as auditors. The next page just talks about what we do as it relates to the schedule of federal expenditures, which is basically reconciling the amounts within the financial statements themselves. And then the last piece is what we do as it relates to required supplemental information, which is unaudited, what we do to supplementary information, which is audited, and then the other information, which is the introductory section, the statistical section, and the schedule of selected statistics. That, again, is unaudited information. So, as Brian said, we did issue an unmodified opinion, which basically states based on the procedures that we performed, the financial statements are not materially misstated, which is the best opinion that the district can get. So if anybody, I may have given you more information than you care to hear about an audit, but if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Brian, I just want to tell you, I did have a couple of your auditors call me and ask me about fraud.
Good.
And they were very professional and very helpful, and we appreciate you helping the district. We expect you to come in and do that kind of work, as well as looking at especially our internal controls. And I think there was one that you instructed
Correct.
CFO on, and she made the board aware of it. And it didn't affect any funds, but it does affect how they get distributed in the...
It's just an allocation between buildings, right, on the Title I funds.
So we just want the things to be as they're supposed to be, and credit to our team there. They take that seriously, and your team does a great job.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
It seems that the auditors get younger and younger and younger every year. I think that's more of a comment on me than them. But
Right. Yeah. When they start telling me I'm like older than their parents, it's not a lot of fun
they
anymore.
sure seem to work hard.
Right. Well, they do that. We have a good crew, so. Thank you.
All right, then, may I have a motion and a second that the Board of Education approve the 2015-2016 audit report as presented in the December 14, 2016 board materials. Roll call. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Applebaum? Yes. Mrs. Feldman? Yes. Mrs. Hopper? Yes. Mrs. Mogerman? Yes. Dr. Sierratino? Yes. Mr. Bishop?
Yes. Motion carries 6-0. Thank you. There is no policy review tonight. I appreciate the board's help as we've met previously, and we'll continue to do so on special meetings to look at the policies as we're going through them. I appreciate all the help and the time that you're putting into that. Work session, budget assumptions. Thank you, Patty.
You are welcome. Let's see. Now this is... So tonight, we are going to talk about our preliminary assumptions as we're preparing for the 17-18 budget. So last month, so November 30th, presented to you was the revised budget for this current year. We have not only the carryover expenditures that were requested that were part of that, but also we updated any revenue information that we knew at the time. So we updated with our new tax rate and our newest assessed valuation that we have. So what we have tonight is to then take the information that we know of in this year and start making our predictions in our building blocks for next year. So kind of what's our layout of our schedule. So of course tonight we are presenting to you our preliminary budget assumptions. Tomorrow we'll be sending out our memo to our directors and our principals with our budget targets for them. God bless you. And our building allocations as well. At the January board meeting we'll have an item for your consideration of approval of our budget assumptions. We also then, that next day, begin negotiations with our teacher group, the PNEA. During the months of December, January, and early February, our program managers and our directors and our principals are busy working on their budget components. So their individual components that make up their expenditure budgets. They'll actually be turning them into us in early February. I believe the date will be the 10th as a target date. Then we'll be reviewing them, both Brian and I, and then we'll bring them to SAT for review as well. With that all put together, along the way we'll be still keeping an eye on our revenue projections, totaling up the projected expenditure adjustments. We'll finalize, of course, negotiations and have the targeted salary increases in there. At the April 12th board meeting is our target for a budget presentation to you, and then to have the final budget package. So, you know, the audit is 100 and some pages, and the preliminary budget is also almost as thick. So we'll have that final package then for your consideration at the June 14th board meeting. So when we start looking at revenues, one of our largest revenue sources, well, the largest revenue source is our local tax. So components of our local tax include not only our assessed valuation, but our CPI and our collection rate. So as you can see from the last several years, we've had a relatively volatile collection rate. Part of that is driven from the protested tax settlements. So historically, we've had a collection rate that's been closer to 98%. However, in the last several years, because we're going back to 2005 and settling some of those protests with our taxpayers, our collection rate has dropped. But in some years, it has increased as well. So last year, we finished with a 95.62%. In this current year budget, we're budgeting 97%, and we're also utilizing that for our future years. When we look at another component of our local taxes is the Consumer Price Index. Not so long ago, we actually had a Consumer Price Index increase of 4%. So what does that mean? So that means on a, for example, a reassessment year, existing property levels, individually they may grow by 20%, but our revenues are capped at whatever the assigned consumer price index is. So even if your individual property increased by 20%, we were only allowed to grow the revenue by that consumer price index. So not too long ago it was 4%, 3.5%, but in the last few years it has been very low at 1.15, 2 years ago, 0.8% last year, and 0.7% this year. Looking up current market conditions, the November year-to-date inflation rate is 1.6%. So right now, I'm assuming a 1.5% going forward for the future years in our CPI. It's based on the December year-to-date, so we'll know more. That's usually, the data usually comes out in January, February, so we'll keep you posted on there too. So our next component, of course, is our new construction. As you can see, that also has varied from year to year. If we look back in fiscal year 16, part of that substantial growth was the add-on of the RGA building that is just out 64 right before the Deerbergs building. So that is, even though it's a Chapter 100, we received half of that assessed valuation, and that added on to our new construction rolls. This past year, so where it's fiscal year 17 on there, we did have a big increase in new construction as well. So as you can see, residential construction along with commercial construction. And this year, we actually had growth in our personal property assessed valuations as well, which in the last several years, we've actually had negative growth in there. So when we're looking at our predictions, some of this is known growth and some of this is estimated growth. So we're taking average growth to look at the residential growth here. Some of the commercial growth is known or estimated growth based on the economic information that we have. When we looked in the spring and looked at new construction, we actually had a pretty large new construction increase for fiscal year 18. Most of that was centered around Monsanto in their Phase 3 property that is out off of the Parkway. Looking at updated data, we have now found out that they have not completed all the phases that they had originally projected. As of the end of December, they had projected, when they first laid out the project, that they would have not only new greenhouses, a new data center, they'd also have a new conference center built by now. What we do know is that the greenhouses are substantially complete. The data center is partially complete, meaning about 50 to 75%, and the conference center has not even begun construction yet. So with that, we've kind of put that new assessed valuation over a few years and not added it all into next year. And of course, we rely on the assessor from St. Louis County to actually provide the amounts for the new construction as well. So they actually look at the property, review the property, and then place it onto the assessment rolls with their developed percentage of completion. But you may notice that in fiscal years 2020 and fiscal year 2021, there is an increase in new construction. Those are based on previous Chapter 100 properties that'll be coming off of Chapter 100. So in fiscal year 2020, most of that growth is from the Edward Jones property that's off of Dorset Road. So this is part of that coming back onto new construction. And of course then in 2021, that is Monsanto Phase 1 off of Chesterfield Parkway. So like I said, these are estimates at this time. The assessor will have the final calculations on those values, but these are the best things that we know at this point in time. And any questions as we go along, please stop me too. So those three components put together give us our assessed valuation. So not too long ago, in 2008, we had about about $4.5 billion in assessed valuation. We are finally getting closer to that number. When the recession hit, our assessed valuation tanked, combined with our protested tax settlements. So that has caused the lowering and the devaluing of our assessed valuation. But through new construction, we are gaining ground in assessed valuation values. It's a slow growth. So combined growth, it's about a 2% growth each year, so the 1.5% from the CPI combined with the new construction estimates. So putting that all together, we're looking at our operating revenue. So once again, our largest components, of course, is the local property tax. Is it on? Okay. We also have increases in Prop C, so that is from the statewide sales tax that we receive. Earnings on investments, we're no longer projecting interest included in there from the property taxes. All of that is from just our investments, and of course, with the news today of the interest rates increasing, that may be good news for us as we receive our revenues from St. Louis County. So that'll increase our revenues based on last year's, hopefully. We have slight growth in this current year from VST revenues, but we know that eventually that's going to gradually decline because our enrollment of the VST students from St. Louis Public Schools are going to gradually decline. So right now we have a rather conservative decline in student enrollment, so as we approach each year, we're going to have a better estimate of that enrollment. Our other local revenues, we do have small increases from our M&M surtax. State funding, of course, we have some growth from our local average daily attendance and driven by the formula, but we have some cuts in there too based on estimated reductions in transportation funding. Federal, we have a slight increase, just looking at a historical federal programming amount, but we still need to continue to monitor. I know you may have heard this before from me, but the TD Ameritrade potential purchase of Scottrade. Scottrade is located here in our district, and we receive two sources of revenue from them, so not just from them, but it's financial institution tax and a county stock tax, so it's based on their transactions and having banking services here. So we'll have to keep close watch on that merger and the possible relocation of some of those services, because that potentially is some revenue that we will be losing in the future. But overall, we are estimating some moderate increases in our operating revenues over the next several years. Of course, this graph depicts our largest sources of revenue, of course, is our local. So that local, remember, combines not only our local taxes, but also the revenue that we receive from VST, from student activities, and then from other local and Prop C. We have a much smaller percentage of state taxes and federal taxes, and other revenues are very small as well. So switching gears and starting to look at our expenditures, one of our focuses, our main focus, of course, on our expenditures is our students. And one of the first things we look at is how many do we have and how many do we project that we'll have. So Dr. Tyson does our projections for our enrollment. He takes the September enrollment count, the official count from our system that we do for DESE, and then he looks at the enrollment trends and then builds them in for us to project out into the future. So with this also takes in a projection for the decrease in our VST students as well. We do have a gradual increase of our residential students. So as you know, with some of our discussions on McKelvey and some other areas, we know that we have some facilities challenges with our growth. So some of our areas are growing faster than what our buildings can keep up with. So we continue to monitor that as well. To look at this graphically, this is putting those total enrollment numbers in on a graph. So you can see that with the decline of the VST students and the increase of the residential students, we still have a rather level increase then in our enrollment patterns.
You address this, and if I missed it, I apologize, but what's the other category under the enrollment projections? We have resident VST and then other.
So the other students represent the students that attend here from the Normandy Collaborative and Riverview Gardens.
That's what I was thinking, but I just wanted to make sure. Okay.
So right now we've kept that in future years at a 30, but we know that at transition years, some of the students that are attending from Riverview Gardens will be going back to their home district. It's such a small number, we've just, for right now, just kept those in there. But we will be adjusting as we know more. So of course, once we look at enrollment, that equates to how much staff we will need. So this last year, we needed to add an additional 10 certified staffing positions in order to fulfill our classroom needs for increased enrollment. Looking at our projections, we're looking at adding 5 certified staff for 17-18, and then 4 additional staff in each of the next years. Right now, those are just rough estimates. As we get a better projection, Amy Joyce will actually go through by classroom and really place those students into the grade levels and see where our I'll say pressure points are, where we may need to expand. But we will keep on updating this prior to actually completing the budget. Next category is our staff salary increases. So listed here for our current year, our teachers, we have a 3.09% increase. Our nurses had a 4.5% increase. Our CWA, our custodial group, 2.80%, and both our support staff and our administrators at 3%. As we're projecting for next year, the contracts that have been settled have been the nurses and the CWA. So our nurses last year negotiated a 3-year agreement, and it was for 9.01% in total, so 2.71 for next year and 1.80 for the following year. And then this next year is the last year for CWA. So next year we will be negotiating with our CWA group again for salary and for contract. So as we go through the negotiation process with the teachers, then we will know more as far as where the salary increases will fall. When we're looking at our other expenditures, we want to pay close attention to those expenditures that we can have moderate control of. We want to, goal 3 is all about efficient use of resources, and we want to be able to control some of the expenditures that we have the ability to control. So one is our benefit plan. Of course, we have wellness initiatives, and we have renegotiated not only our pharmacy but our medical as well this past year. The medical renegotiation, though, does not take effect until next year. Our pharmacy benefit renegotiation actually took effect as of October 1st. But with that, for our next year, our employees will not pay any part of the increase for our medical benefits. That was all taken by the district, so that was a 5% increase, but it was all within the district budgeted amount. So as of right now, our medical benefit plan for 2016, the calendar year, is running at a surplus too, a very nice surplus. So rule of thumb, they say that every 5 years you have a really bad year, which I believe that we had in 13, and maybe it rolled over into 14, and this may be that 1 in 5 years that you have a super good year. So we do have some high claims, and the high claims, meaning over 50,000, are about the same in number as last year. However, the average spend per high claim is much lower than we had last year. We have not had any claims so far this year that has broken the stop loss. Last year, by this time, we had at least 2, maybe 3, that had gone into stop loss recovery.
What's the stop loss?
So it is 300,000, but for the first one, it's 425,000. And that is medical spend plus pharmacy combined. Retirement, so from PSRS and peers earlier this year, we had rumors that the contribution rates for 17-18 would be increased, but we have recently heard that those are frozen for the 17-18 school year. That is good news not only for our staff, but it's also good news for our budget as well, because it's matching contribution. So it's 14.5% from a teacher's paycheck, but it's a matching 14.5% from our budget as well. And for support staff, it's 6.86% from the paycheck and 6.86% from the budget. So that is good news that at least one of those expenses are frozen. At tonight's board meeting, you approved the purchase of 10 new buses with CNG fuel. Of course, that increases our savings on fuel and lowers our dependence on diesel fuel. So that helps to control our expenditures. Energy savings, as Chris pointed out today, Eric did a wonderful job of stepping through everything with the Better Building Challenge and what we're, really what he's leading with Goal 3, Measurable Objective 3 with the Sustainability Action Team. But some of the true stuff that we're seeing is the bond issue project. So those that, they of course go with Scott and Mike's help too with the planning, but with the new HVAC systems, new roofing, et cetera, that's adding to our efficiency and helping us to lower our energy costs. We're also realizing the impact from our LED lighting savings on our parking lots as well. So not only do we see better, but we're saving money at the same time. One other item that you approved this evening was our annual allocation for music insurance. Included in there was our mod factor decreased by almost 10 points, and that is our actual spending factor that goes along with our workers' comp insurance. So with that, essentially, we saved about $98,000 from last year's allocation. So having a focus on safety is very important in order to at least contain and control some of those expenditures. As we're approaching some of the TLA discussions and instruction, we're looking at the technology refresh and a possible implementation of one-on-one. With that, we may need additional funding to implement not only in current years, but then in future years too. So we're building those budgets currently. Well, actually, Jason is working on those budgets currently, so we'll know more as we budget. And of course, what we've developed in SAT is a combined worksheet that we're all working with putting our priorities of our own individual program budgets into, whether it's replacement cycles or looking at needs for students. And as we're developing our budgets, we'll prioritize and add the things into our budget that we can afford. For our operations departments, part of our Goal 3 that we approved this evening, one of our first action steps is looking at zero-based budgeting for the operation departments. So why? Well, of course, that gives it more direct focus on the planning and limits on spending. So it's not new for all the operations departments. Many of them do a sort of zero-based budgeting, but this year we're going to go full in with the operations budgets. So each expense is going to be analyzed for its need and for its cost. But we need to be very careful not to leave out reserves for emergencies and unplanned large repairs. Or as Mike says, salt, in case we have snow. So putting that all together, this slide's a little hard to see, but combined looking at our salary increases with some of our savings from our energy and from our fuel, our target here was to have that same moderate expenditure growth year over year. You may see in this current year we have a slightly larger percentage increase than we have in either the year prior or the succeeding year. Part of that is because the carryover budgets are included in there as well. Also, when we look at its salaries for the current year, so for 16-17, we had less in turnover savings than we have in prior year. So we believe that the end of June 2015, anyone that was eligible for retirement took retirement in order to receive the incentives. So the end of June 16, we had less retirement coming into this year. We hope that in future years we still have that turnover or retirement savings of some sort. So staff still were able to have some savings from that. With that too, combining our revenues along with our expenditures, you know that our focus is on a slight fund balance increase. And with these projections, we do have a 0.25% fund balance projection built in for each of the future years. So looking at total expenditures, of course, our largest expenditure is our salaries and our benefits. So it makes up about a little bit over 85% of our total operating budget. Then we have purchase services. A big portion of the purchase service amount to remember is the amount that we pay for our substitute teachers. So at one point in time, that used to be in our salary number, and now that's in purchase services. And then supplies includes things like instructional materials and items for our students. This is a slide that Brian put together last year for our budget, but I think it still tells our story. We have moderate growth in our revenues, followed by our just moderate growth in our expenditures, but with that, it equates to moderate growth in our fund balance as well. So over the next 4 years, we're estimating a 1% increase in our fund balance percentage then too. So at this time, I welcome any feedback or comments that you have on the budget or any questions. If I'm not able to answer it, then possibly Brian is.
Thanks, Patty. When I read this, I added up the salaries and the benefits, and I came to 85.34%. And I remember when Dr. Marty came, we were at around 85%, and he was trying to inch us back towards 80%, and I think we realized that that wasn't feasible. But now that I realize that we have to add 5.63% for purchase services, I think we're going in the wrong direction.
Well, not all of the purchase services is substitute services. There's lots of other purchase services in there too. So I was just pointing out that one of the larger items in there is Kelly subs that used to be in the salaries.
But it does seem like we're weighted in the wrong direction from where we want to be, or has that number changed? Has that percentage changed?
Well, I think what it does tell a story of is that one of our most focused expenditures has been supporting our teaching staff and our employees in trying to retain the best retain and to attract and recruit the most qualified staff, and with that we have to have an attractive salary schedule. So we've been trying then to focus the other expenditures and maintain where we can or cut where we can in order to still have a focus on maintaining our highly qualified employee group. So is it wrong?
Well, that was when he first came here.
Yeah. So,
and also, I mean, with our efforts to reduce, to be more efficient,
right.
And so that would make that percentage lower. And
correct.
So good job, Eric. Right.
And it's a planning department too. So it's them building in, and quite honestly, it's being able to put newer equipment in our buildings. So thank you to our citizens too that approved our bond referendum in 2014. Because of those projects, we're able to put that newer equipment in as well. So not only working on the retro commissioning projects and the LED lighting, the things that we're doing out of operating expenditures, but also doing the bigger system changes, which can only be supplied by the bond funds as well.
I might just add that
With the staffing ratios that we have a very good student-teacher ratio that we've tried to maintain, low class sizes, especially with the elementary levels. And so I think that is a challenge to reduce any staffing and still maintain quality class sizes.
It is.
And the fund balance number?
We ended last year with 19.22.
So we've made some really great strides there.
Absolutely.
So the sports marketing efforts we've made, is that reflected on the student activities line of the operating revenue?
The $250,000 estimate per year is revenue, I believe.
It's a $3.5 million.
3.5, no, that is not in there. So that is operating funds. So when we look at, and I don't think we have that in here, I didn't include the summary of the capital projects fund. So right now, any of the revenues that we receive, we are replenishing capital projects with because
We're not at the point yet.
No.
So in the future, when the scoreboards are all paid for, will it be reflected on the revenue
Yes.
page? Okay.
Yes, because then it'll turn into operating revenues that goes back to student activities. So currently, we have commitments of just over $1 million. We're going into January will mark our second-year anniversary of having the contract signed and the program initiated. So right now, that is below the targets that we were initially given for that. So we definitely paid out more than what we have promised to come in at this time. But they have not stopped their marketing efforts. I know that Mike Roth has meetings with them on a very regular basis, and he is meeting with potential partners almost weekly to see if we can get additional partners. So it's not like it's forgotten about. They are working on it.
Okay.
On the revenue side, student activities, it's about $3.5 million. And then on the opposite side, the expenditure side is 3.5. So why does that turn out to be that way?
You know, it is magically that each year, like if you go in and look in your CAFR too, magically it ends up about the same each year. So sometimes it's different by 100,000, one of the revenue or the expenditure. So they may spend more one year or receive in more one year, but the historical trend has been almost right at that 3.5.
So is that considered a wash then?
Correct.
Yeah.
And we budget it for, for it to be equaled out. So same thing with like our state grants or our federal grants. If we have it in a revenue, we make sure that the matching expenditure is the same amount.
Thank you.
Patty, in your assumptions, given that the Federal Reserve has now said there'll probably be a couple of increases next year, it's very likely. Are you planning to include anything like that? Probably be 2 increases next year.
So currently, these do not include that because literally that happened today. So as we're getting closer to when we present to you in April, those assumptions will be in there because we're currently starting to receive the funding in from St. Louis County. We haven't received our big payment yet unless it came in today. Did it come in? So we might have received, no, not yet. So last week, I think we received just over $2 million. So this week we should receive a little bit bigger payment in hopes that we can turn around and pay off our TANs. But by the end of the year, so in a few weeks, we'll have a substantial amount of revenue in, hopefully from the county, and we'll be able to then put out investment bids, and we'll know more of what our estimated revenues will be from those bids.
I think for the first time in many, many years, I've had a few constituents who have called to say thank you for the property tax going down. In some cases it went down quite a bit, but in all cases it went down.
Very good. Well, that compiled with, not only did our residential rate this year not have recoupment in it, but remember last year the county billed it twice. So kind of doubled that for us. So.
Our food, I take it food costs are in here. And I just recently was looking at something that talked about food waste, and actually how waste getting dumped into the landfills actually hurts the environment and things of that nature. And some of the best ways to reduce food costs and keep the environment safe is food to order, and you cook it as it's ordered and prepared. Are there any more studies, or is there an evaluation being done on Parkway's food services and how we're making the food for the students, how much waste there is that's going into the landfills, and how we might be able to be more fiscally responsible with that?
So gradually, we will be reporting out more and more on KPIs. So certainly participation is one of the KPIs for the nutritional services. But I do want to add that food waste, so anything that is extra or waste, doesn't necessarily just go into a landfill here, because we do have a composting program.
Okay.
So anything that is compostable does go into the composting bins. Marlene, do you have any other comments on that? So we do try to produce based on need, but on a daily basis, remember, our production centers are separate from the schools. So it's not like they can go classroom to classroom, ask for who's going to buy lunch today, and then the elementary school kitchen staff make that lunch and have it available and zero waste. Ours is a little more complicated because we have the 3 production centers, and the timing of production to there to get that to the school probably does not fit in an actual count from the students in that morning. So I know they try and estimate, but they don't want to underestimate too much because they don't want any child left without food either. So, you have the risk on both sides there. But that is one of the biggest challenges that Marlene and her group faces.
Right, and I would add too that we're far above, not far above, but they're just now talking about how DESE's recommending that you have, when children don't want an extra apple or something, but because of the regulations, they're forced or encouraged to take their fruit or vegetable, there are side baskets that they can share. I know we don't like sharing food, like Robin says, because of allergies, but that is consumed by either students who want some bread and servings and don't have the money, and or it is also offered to the nurse in the office when there are students who are still hungry after lunch.
Okay.
So we are working diligently not to have any food waste.
Yeah, okay, good.
This is related to the food service, not really to the budget. But I just remembered, I read something, I can't remember where I read it, about a school district that has a link on the website for people to donate if there are, for example, there's a family that they're in arrears with their food account, that people can donate. And as part of our caring initiative, I thought that would be really something to explore. I wish I could remember what school district it was.
I think
and how
that
they
sounds
did it.
tremendous.
But it's completely voluntary, and someone just can donate anonymously to help so that a child can get a full lunch, a full hot lunch.
We might work with Mr. Tandy's group to see if we can add that to our
I thought
website.
That was really neat.
That's a great suggestion.
We have had, just recently, that's strange that you mentioned that, an individual come up at one of the schools and offered to pay off charges.
How about that?
This month offered a substantial amount of money, so we're working with them to see how they would like it placed. And in past, there's been other schools who actually, administration has collected money at the end of school in May to pay out any balances, so that that particular food service in their school would not be.
Because whatever the family situation is, it's not that child's fault that he gets to school and can't have lunch. So,
And I might just say,
That's an excellent idea.
for Marlene, but those at home can't hear. So if we have any kind of comment that might last more than a sentence, we probably ought to bring them up so anybody watching will know what the comment was. I got good ears tonight. Thank you, Marlene. It's not an easy job. And neither is putting together this budget. Are there any other questions for Patty and for staff? Appreciate this great work and a good start to our 2017-18 budget.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
16.0, call for a special meeting. May I have a motion and a second that the Board of Education call for a special meeting on January 9th, 2017, beginning at 5 p.m. at the Administrative Center for the purpose of reviewing Section C and Section Q of the Board of Policy. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? There are none. Motion carries 6-0. Our next anticipated closed session will be held on Wednesday, January 11th, 2017 at 6 p.m. at Central Middle School. Details of the closed session will be posted within 24 hours of the anticipated meeting. May I now have a motion and a second to adjourn our regular meeting? Thank you. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries 6-0. At this time, we are adjourned.
Thank you.